Hello, good evening from where I am in the United States. It is a great pleasure to be with you for this event and to be asked to speak. I will be speaking on the notion of content licensing, particularly reflecting what Teo just said about the work that a publisher such as ACS is publishing. How does it get licensed? And we're going to use the term licensing in two different ways. So the first way that we might use the term licensing is that when libraries license for access to information materials. Library licensing agreements are those legal contracts between a library and a publisher or a vendor that defines how the library and its users can access and use digital content. Such content might be journals or ebooks. Licenses for access typically involve payment and then the restriction of use of the content to what are known as authorized users. For example, students and faculty of a single institution. The contract also typically explains how the users can use the material and whether the library can use it for interlibrary loan or other types of process. So that is licensing for access. The second kind of licensing we can talk about is licensing for use. This kind of licensing is done by the author or the copyright owner through the Creative Commons licenses. Creative Commons licenses, or CC licenses, are statements that are applied to copyright materials by the copyright holders of that work, typically the author. These licenses offer permissions for other people to be able to use, share, or modify the work beyond the uses that would be allowed by copyright. So copyright limitations and exceptions, such as fair use or permission to create access for people with disability, adhere in copyright itself. CC licenses give permission beyond that. For example, to reuse the work, to disseminate it, to make derivative copies. So these are two ways that we talk about content licensing. Let's focus first on the components of a library license agreement. These, as I mentioned, are legal contracts. And because they are legal contracts, they take the structure of a legal contract. We will typically see in a library licensing agreement these categories of information: parties and scope, who is party to the contract, and the specific content or collections that are covered by the contract. Authorized users, who is authorized to access the content? For example, enrolled students, current faculty, on-site visitors. What are they allowed to do with this content under the library license agreement? And this will typically be the allowed activities of reading, downloading, interlibrary loan, or use in courses. It will typically not allow further dissemination or copying of the materials. How those restricted users are going to get access to the content: through a login and password, IP recognition, proxy server, single sign-on. Are there any restrictions on the access that is being permitted? For example, is systematic downloading allowed? What about data mining? And what are the fees and payment terms? What money will the library be paying for this subscription? Will there be renewals? And how will the payments be made? There will typically be a statement that explains that the copyright in these materials is not being transferred. And then, of course, terms for termination and renewal, and what governing law or liability is overriding the contract, underscoring the contract as a whole. But most importantly, we see in a library license agreement that the primary mechanism is to only allow a certain set of users limited rights to access, read, download, and maybe print the material. In contrast, Creative Commons licenses are applied by the copyright holder to open up or expand the resources uses by anyone. So this is not limited to any particular library or user group, but is available through a CC license to any person in the world. The process of applying a Creative Commons license is that the copyright holder chooses a Creative Commons license. They assign the Creative Commons license to the work, and then the work is distributed with the CC license attached or embedded within it. So it's a rather simple process to assign a Creative Commons license. That process must be done by the copyright holder. There are a range of Creative Commons licenses that a copyright holder might choose to apply to their work. The most fundamental is a component of all of the license, which is CC BY. CC BY is attribution required. That means that when you disseminate or use the work, credit must be given to the copyright holder or creator of the work itself. The other Creative Commons licenses that you see here take the CC BY, which is a very expansive license, and then narrow that license to only specific use cases. So, for example, CC BY NC says that the materials may only be copied or further disseminated for non-commercial purposes. And when those non-commercial purposes are done, attribution must be given. CC BY SA says it can be commercial use, but anytime you remix or use this work, you must also apply a CC BY SA license to the new work. And so it is share alike. If you use my work, then you must put the same license on your work. There is also the CC BY ND, which says you may disseminate the entire work, but not create any derivatives of it. And one can also have CC BY NC ND. You may disseminate this work, copies of it. You may not create derivatives, and you may not do so for commercial purposes. So the most important thing to remember about a Creative Commons license is that a Creative Commons license can never limit what is permitted under copyright exceptions or limitations. It always expands what is possible for a user of a work. And as I said, the most expansive license is the CC BY. With respect to data, it is recommended that people put a CC BY to allow the greatest possible reuse. Many people will recommend the same for the text article as well, though there are some debates and different perspectives on this. So I want to now relate these two kinds of licenses to the FAIR principles. Both of these kinds of licenses help us with making any content, data or otherwise, findable and accessible. But only the Creative Commons license also help us make it interoperable and reusable. So to the degree that we are seeking to make data and publications more fair, the Creative Commons license, which makes them openly available and reusable, not only findable and accessible to a limited set of licensed parties, CC licenses are the mechanism for making all of these resources more fair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about content licensing with you. Back to our moderator.